Welcome back, everybody. This is episode 15 of our conflict series, Cracking Conflict. And today we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to spend some time kind of recapping the journey that we have taken you guys through, summarizing it and putting it together, and really making sure that we have something useful for you guys to utilize going forward. And probably one of the best ways for us to do this is talking about in general. Our first couple of episodes, we introduced the idea that conflict is going to happen. You heard me talking about the need to maybe to normalize the idea of it, to create a culture where we know how to utilize it and to not be so afraid of it, because quite frankly, that is most people's response is fear. And we spent the episodes 1 and 2 kind of talking about that journey going from fear to understanding the value that there is in conflict, and getting people to kind of change their mind and their mindset about it. And then as we shifted over into episodes 3 and 4, we spent a lot of time talking about what happens physiologically within our body, and how we respond and react and those signals and those cues. And it got a little neurological, but most of you guys kind of geeked out with us as we went through some of those pieces and really talked about what happened within our bodies and our neural wiring, and how they impact, quite frankly, the choices that we make and the way that we respond. And then probably for most of 5 through 7 episodes, you heard an awful lot of me talking, and us reviewing what happens at work as well in our personal lives, with the patterns that each of us have and learning to recognize those particular type of distortions, those particular kinds of responses, recognizing how our history, personal and professional, build to these patterns, and that you can actually learn to regulate your emotions and become more aware of those pieces, and really, really learning how to improve your listening skills to be a better participant in the conflict and in learning to resolve it.
So the way we designed the podcast was to give you a little bit of a flavor of a topic and then layer on it. We wanted to give you both the external perspective, the internal perspective, the what's happening inside us, what's happening outside. So episodes 8 and 9, we talked about how differences are important and differences are also hotbed for conflict. In episode 9, we went quite deep into cognitive distortions, exploring how bias and diversity complicates but also enriches conflict. Then we really stepped into depth of how you do this, which was episodes 10 through 14. We talked about understanding the skills that are required, some practical examples of respectful dissent, how you co-create solutions, how you bridge the cultural differences, and then finally we talked about the inner critic and how you deal with that, because all these things are important skills that you need when you deal with conflict and when you leverage conflict. Today's episode is all about showing you how we have traveled through what is essentially quite a complex topic and tried to make sense of it in a way that is accessible. Conflict fluency is a skill that's going to be useful in all aspects of life. And building that fluency really starts with an intention to address it. It also requires some level of reflection and essentially getting into that mindset of getting comfortable with discomfort. I was thinking maybe this is the time now to talk about what good looks like.
Going back to what we talked about in the beginning, there is value in conflict. Having dissenting opinions, poking holes in ideas can make a plan and a team stronger. So how do we do that? Particularly from a team standpoint, but also as an individual. Part of it, the big picture is we've got, as you said just a few moments ago, we've got to be able to sit comfortably in discomfort. And that is a skill that we can work on practicing, quite frankly. And working together to create meaning and the purpose behind what we're doing, being intentional in our conversations and in our thoughts, learning how to respond rather than just react. Those are things, that's what good looks like. And time and practice brings confidence, and confidence can bring that fluency or that comfort level. Some of the specific things that I think is really important for people to understand what a good conflict fluent or comfortable team looks like is asking clear questions, being concise about it, having clean boundaries, and management of understanding of what those boundaries are, making sure that we really pay attention and working on repairing and acknowledging when there has been a rupture.
Yeah, I really like that because teams that try to sweep things under the carpet, they're not going to be conflict fluent, right? That's something that
No.
we've seen time and time again.
Mhm.
You do need to fess up,
It,
face it.
yep, yep. And model it. Model
Yeah.
it when, for the team. And this is something that certainly can be done best perhaps by a leader, but I've seen a much more subordinate member of a team model healthy behavior, and it's picked up by others. It's a graceful transition. So, yes, learning to repair after there's been a rupture and acknowledging it. I think another really great piece is let's, label the elephant in the middle of the room. Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Let's talk about like what might be going on here in a non-defensive way. And quite frankly, we want to welcome differences among our
Mm.
teams. We want to include them. If we all come to the table with the exact same ideas, how do we ever get innovation? How do we ever be able to predict the problems that could be coming in order to get ahead of them and problem solve?
You need the conflict to happen before the decision's been made so that you've tested your
Yeah.
ideas robustly and had all the arguments you need
Yes.
before the decision is made.
Because if people have a conflict, but they're not speaking up about it, sometimes that's when it emerges after we think we have alignment. And we're at the end to learning to recognize them and address them and create a culture where it is safe psychologically to speak. We have tools that help people learn how to navigate it. We create and model behavior that helps people model it, and that we want to try to teach those tools beforehand.
I think the other one is about listening, isn't
Yeah.
it? And not just about curiosity, but it's
Mhm.
about listening for empathy as well,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
that
utilizing it.
creates that trust. Yeah.
One of the most important tools is probably listening, and not listening with your biased ears, but listening to understand, seeking to
Yeah.
understand, not seeking to argue or change a mind.
Mm.
And when someone feels heard and their opinion, even if disagreed with, is respected, conflict can be navigated to a point of alignment much more often. And I would say, probably finally, some of the biggest pieces that really do need to be addressed, and that's what you talked about watching that tendency, that caution to sweep things under the rug or to just shift the topic so we move away from the conflict. We really, really want to catch that friction, those fractions that are starting to happen earlier on when they're smaller
Yes.
versus when they grow. And each time that you're able to resolve and respectfully communicate about them, it builds layers of trust. And a really good team, a really strong conflict fluent team, is not afraid of disagreements, is not
Mm.
afraid of sharing dissenting opinions. They are open to the communication and the dialogue, and they are looking for that collective alignment of the team at the end. And what happens, how that happens, is through good communication, respectful interactions, and the building of trust.
Lovely. Yeah, that's aspirational and inspirational. So have
Hopefully.
you come across teams like that?
Yes, I think back to the Beatles. All right,
Hmm.
they talk about how
The earlier part.
the earlier part of the Beatles spent thousands of hours working together, doing the same things over and over, but tweaking and pushing and shoving back against and forth each other until they created this rhythm. A good team learns to be able to protect each other's, perceptions, but they don't stay in a place of assumptions.
Yes.
And so you make an assumption, I know what this person is going to do, and then they don't, but you're watching them well enough to know, and you adapt. A good team involves adaptation, right? And
Yes.
so, working together, but that absolutely cannot mean complete, smooth, well-oiled machine, certainly not in the beginning. And I would even argue that it's probably not the most effective way to develop a good
I
product.
think personally, if a team feels too harmonious, then it's not really buzzing together. There has to be that element of heat. There has to be that conflict for the team to learn and grow. And what I think might be slightly difficult to get our heads around is the fact that we're not really aiming to remove conflict. We're not aiming to resolve it in that sense. What we're aiming to do is learn to use it better. And part of that is you will feel discomfort.
Yeah. I think that's an incredibly important point.
So,
Okay.
so where do we start? 14 episodes of lots of advice and sharing, but we can start small and we can start right away. And how do you start? First thing is have a plan and that intentionality around that plan. This week, as an example, watch out one of your personal patterns, whether it's your bias or your cognitive distortion. I think that's a useful thing, isn't it? You stay in that objective state of, I'm going to catch myself.
Becoming aware of what those biases are, that hopefully, as we were listening to some of our earlier episodes, it triggered some things within yourself, knowing some that self-awareness. And then I think it's a great idea to practice and plan it. Where does it emerge? Where does it pop up? Where are you most inclined to do this? Is it at work? Is it in certain interactions? Is it with certain people? Is it about certain emotional states that you're in? We all got to watch out for the hangry moments, right? When we're hungry and not doing well. So, but thinking about what is your personal pattern and how to watch for it and see if you can identify it in the moment. The
Yeah,
first step is awareness.
yeah. So maybe that's your challenge, listener. This week, catch yourself, your one bias and maybe one cognitive distortion. We don't need to know the 50 biases that are out there. Just pick one. And the joy of doing that is because you're not assigning blame. You're now in that state of, I'm going to catch myself in those conditions. It almost becomes a game.
Yeah. Ownership and accountability, not fault and blame.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, what about a de-escalation habit to practice?
But looking for opportunities. And maybe it's observing, watching someone else's conflict. But if you can actively practice one of the things that we talked about, sort of leaning into a conflict and finding a way to bring it down in ways that you do that are engaging, are active listening, reflecting back statements. Here's what I heard you say. Did I get that right? Those kind of examples, those kinds of things to practice. Hey, it sounds like this is a pretty important topic to you. I'd like to review it a little bit further. Can I ask you some questions? Those kind of conversations can shift away, still valuably addressing the concern that is emerging as a conflict, but it's moving towards something else, either a conversation instead of an argument, a possible resolution, or at least better understanding. That concept of staying curious. This is a really great place to practice it. And if you can't actively do it, you can watch it in others. You can watch it when you're watching some shows on TV and start in your
That's a
head
good
thinking,
idea.
what would I say if I was the one sitting there? And it's always, it's always better to have a plan. And as you were saying before, and it's better to be able to practice that plan so that when it's game time, it's much more automatic and comfortable for you.
Speaking of game, the final, I think, thing to practice, one of the building blocks, would be a team ritual. And when I'm talking about team, I don't mean team as in just workplace team. Your family is a team. It can be you and your friends. Doesn't matter who it is, but a bunch of people who can call themselves a team. Figure out a ritual that you'll have around this. Um, it's always fun when you practice it with others. So have a team ritual that you will agree. So you can, an example of it is we're going to disagree, we're going to respectfully disagree. And if that doesn't happen, we'll have a dialogue about it. Um, Something like that.
I've seen teams do this, and it's easier to practice when you know you're practicing. It's in a business setting, it could look like starting a routine, putting it on maybe the agenda. Item number one on the agenda is, do people have concerns they want to bring up? about a problem. Now, you have your own agenda, or maybe you put it as the last item on the agenda is what are future things we're going to need to talk about. But building into the culture, building into, you use the word ritual, I might use a routine word that to start to know that let's bring conflict forward and not let it fester back there and then explode.
One of the favorite ones that I use is actually to talk to my team about how they disagree. And that's not about respectful disagreement or not. It's what do you do when you're in disagreement? And it can get quite funny. Like, do you just crunch your face? Do you kind of switch off? Do you get a twitch? And so we make it really fun about what is your tell?
And again, remember the research says when you're dealing with people that you know really well, most of the time, like 80, 90%, you're going to get that emotion right. You may not know what's going on inside their head, though. And so that's where communication comes in.
Yeah. So 3 little things to practice, and you will notice you'll get better at it the more you practice. So we leave it at that. We've had a whirlwind tour through the 14 episodes. And what do we want to discuss next? We were talking about what do we do next? How do we add more value? How do we take this message around conflict being good and not something to be afraid of? And it's part of being human. And one of the things earlier on we had been talking about is, you know what? The best place to practice conflict, or the best time to practice conflict, is end of the year.
Yeah.
Because that's festive season, and you've got the perfect cauldron of stressors. You've got family, you've got to buy gifts, you've got to not forget anyone. What else? What else
Hosting the pressures and the responsibility of hosting, and often at work you've got the end of year reviews and stuff that's going on, responsibilities that need to get done.
And one is unique to New Zealand and probably Australia and maybe the Southern Hemisphere, because we're stepping into summer, especially New Zealand and Australia, the whole country just shuts down for 2 weeks. And for some reason, every year, clients want to get things done just before those 2 weeks, as though the world's going to end after Christmas. But it doesn't, and everything's waiting, but it doesn't matter. So from November, everyone's walking around like headless chook.
So I feel like, leading into the holiday season, and it really actually kind of starts in October here in the US because we all get excited about pumpkin spice season with Halloween, and into the year. Yeah, that's probably a good time for us to start talking about conflict as a live event. So we'll open it up to our subscribers. We have some ideas for future seasons as well, but we'd love to hear what folks have to say.
Okay, so that's it for now. Look out for our live event announcement. But if you're interested, drop a comment in the channel.
Bye for now.